Here are 4 words in Hindi, all beginning with the character A. What are these 4? Ashobhaniya, in English ugly, anuchit, in English improper, akaran, in English without justification, and anavashyak, in English unnecessary. Who spoke these words? Now normally today's generations would think that it is Narendra Modi who likes these acronyms and who likes these rhyming words. But Narendra Modi has been brought up in the BJP, Jansangh, RSS culture. So for many of them, their guru in oratory is Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So Atal Bihari Vajpayee used these 4 expressions. What is it that he used these 4 expressions for? And Vajpayee, as we know, was very soft spoken. This was about something that happened exactly 51 years ago this day, which was bank nationalization. When I say this day, 19th July, when I am recording this episode of Clutter. So some of you might remember that early on in Clutter, we did talk about bank nationalization again in episode 217, and I am sharing a link with you today. You can see that because we talk about the economics of bank nationalization and the impact in much greater detail. I will talk about that briefly now because I know that you people keep asking me to talk about political history. Let me talk about some political history through something that happened 51 years ago. 217, as you can guess, was exactly a year ago, episode 217. So that was on the 50th anniversary. So once again, 50th and 51st, this is our favorite subject, and we start with Atal Bihari Vajpayee's 4-word description for what happened. Ashobhaniya, anuchit, akaran, anavashyak. While Vajpayee showed his anger, also because of the way this was done. This was an ordinance brought in on a Saturday. 19 July in 1969 was a Saturday. This ordinance was brought in almost by stealth. In fact, when you look at demonetization as having been done by stealth so quickly without many clearances, where nobody even seemed to know within the government also, this was the first example of something like that happening with India's economy. 1969, bank nationalization. In fact, I could also say today that both steps have proven about equally disastrous. Bank nationalization was supposed to do many wonderful things for India's poor. You might say that it increased branches in rural India to begin with, but beyond that, it did nothing. In fact, as far as social control of the banks was concerned, and fixing special category quotas, etc. was concerned, that Morarji Desai had started earlier in the same year as Indira Gandhi's finance minister, because he had put banks under social control. Having said that, a more sound intellectual argument against bank nationalization was made by Minu Masani, which is not surprising. Minu Masani was the leader of the Swatantra Party, India's last genuine party of a right-wing view on the economy. Also a party that was libertarian in many ways, and Minu Masani was a pakka libertarian and a wonderful intellectual. In fact, he's no more, but his son Zarir is a fine writer also, occasionally writes for us also. So Minu Masani said, he predicted that this will have 3 consequences, and listen to his words. These are all, I picked these up from parliament debates. He said, 1, that this will result in bureaucratic red tapeism. Hua ke nahi hua? Did it happen or not? Number 2, this will lead to graft and corruption. Hua ke nahi hua? Graft and corruption and political interference, he said. Hua ke nahi hua? Did it happen? Did it not happen? Number 3, he said, this will create a chronic loss-making business. Hua ke nahi hua? Because now see what's happened to government's wealth and what's happened to our wealth as citizens and taxpayers. Even under Narendra Modi, you would have thought that he will reverse this big mistake made by Mrs. Gandhi 51 years ago, but he hasn't yet done it, because the problem in India is, all democracies, but India in particular, that bad ideas once implemented are very durable. It's almost impossible. It needs somebody a lot of doing, a lot of courage, or a set of circumstances to reverse them. Think about the retrospective Act amendment that Pranab Mukherjee carried out. It's now been 8 years. There have been many finance ministers. Nobody has dared to reverse it. So a bad idea, once implemented, stays. And that is true of bank nationalization also. You would have expected that Narendra Modi, with so much power, would have done it. But you know what? Bad ideas usually come from political populism. Political populism is very profitable in the short run. It is risky in the short run. Now, what is profitable in the short run, political populism, is very damaging in the long run. But in politics, who cares about the long run? I want to win this election. How am I bothered whether the next guy wins his election or not? So that short-termism then takes over, and it's a surprise and disappointment that Narendra Modi has not moved more aggressively. He's done a few things. First, he's made big mistakes like trying to recapitalize these banks. And funnily, you can go and check out the data in detail because it changes every day. About 3.5 lakh crores of good money of taxpayers has been given by way of recapitalization to nationalized banks. Whereas if you see the value of the government's investment and the value of these banks, the same banks have lost more than 4 lakh crores in their market cap in the same period. So whatever you put in there has already gone out. If you really wanted to spend this money for the poor, you could have given it directly to the poor. Poor would have benefited. Also, you would have got more value for money, maybe even more votes for money. But once again, a bad decision made stays. Now, efforts were made again by Modi government, the previous one and now, to then at least reduce the size of the problem, diminish the size of the problem. And one of those was bank consolidation. That you can consolidate these banks, 21 banks can become 12. Good idea, a good beginning. But then what is the future? What's the point of having 12 bad banks instead of 21 bad banks? Because it's the same bad banks. And frankly, when you collapse them into one, usually you find that the value of the sum is not the sum of the parts, which means if you add, say, Vijaya Bank and Dena Bank to Bank of Baroda, what comes out is not an addition of all their values. Because people, the markets don't put value to state enterprises. So the lesson is that you have to get rid of them. Because the other method that India's leaders have used, India's political economy has used, of answering this problem of PSU white elephants is to stop funding them further, is to stop subsidizing their losses and giving them more capital, and changing the rules and laws whereby private sector can come into those fields. So you've seen this happen with aviation. Air India is there, still not sold, but it's there. But so many others have come up. So aviation sector in India is not weighed down by Air India. Similarly, telecom, MTNL, BSNL, they are there. But private telecom sector has been allowed to come in. Now that cannot be done with banks. Simply because when MTNL goes wrong, you don't have to worry so much. Or when Air India goes wrong, okay, you can give them a little loan or something, or you can give sovereign guarantees for your loan. But banks are large, and banks need large capital, and the fate of millions and millions of depositors is involved. So banks have to be recapitalized. So banks then become an endless vacuum system for the exchequer. If you think about the banks in general, PSU banks today are about 63% of India's deposits. It changes again on a daily basis, and when you count it, I am taking the last statement made in Parliament and extrapolating it to today's figures with some estimates. About 63% of India's deposits, 58% of India's loans, and 95% of the bad debts in our banking system. 95%. Now you may again say that market cap is not a very good measure. I know it's not a perfect measure, but if you just think about it, then the value of just HDFC Bank, which came up 24 years ago, after economic reform, value of that one bank, that is 6 lakh plus crore, is more than all the nationalized banks put together, including the State Bank of India. In fact, State Bank of India today is 1.68 trillion rupees, 1,68,000 crores. Today, even ICICI Bank and Kotak Bank have much more value than it. In fact, Kotak Bank, which is so new, values 1 lakh crore more than SBI. SBI is a fine bank. It's also run well, but there are limitations to what a government-run entity can command in the market. And as long as Government of India has the State Bank of India, and it had it in 69 also, there was no economic or social justification, definitely not an economic justification to nationalize the rest. Maybe government could have given more capital to State Bank of India and got it to expand. So what Mrs. Gandhi did in 1969 was neither an economic step nor a social step. It was a political step. But she was using it to edge out, humiliate and edge out Morarji Desai, split the party between the left and the right and make her own hard turn. So this became an instrument to her own hard turn, and which had very bad consequences, including India's economy really going down the drain, India's inflation going into 20s, late 20s, in fact, 27%, 26% by 1974-75. Then the emergency, India's tax rates going to 97.5%, imagine, 97.5%, and big nationalization of India's oil companies, insurance companies, some of which is now, fortunately, being undone by the Modi government. Petroleum in particular. So you see BPCL, for example, that's a good example of the bad decisions of that period being undone now. So bank nationalization is one of them. The other thing that bank nationalization has brought to us is scandals. There is a history of scandals in all banks, but particularly in nationalized banks. Because private banks, even when there are scandals, banks are smaller, shareholders move in faster, and you can get rid of the management and you can get rid of the owners and change ownership. Yes Bank is a good example. Yes Bank had big problems, but what's happened? You threw out the management. In fact, the owner is right now in jail under detention as an under trial. You brought in a new management, some fresh equity, and I know the market cap is not a perfect measure, but it is the one tangible thing we have. The market cap of Yes Bank is more than Dena Bank and Vijaya Bank put together. In fact, it's even more than Canara Bank and Central Bank put together. Yes Bank is about 24,000 crores, Canara Bank is 14,800, Central Bank is 9,500. Old banks. Irony of ironies, if Yes Bank is standing today, it is because one PSU bank, State Bank of India, put in equity and made it survive. It's possible in the course of time that State Bank will make a lot of money on that investment, because a private brand franchise in banking or in any business will always be valued enormously more than a PSU or a government franchise. So once again, on the 51st anniversary of Indira Gandhi's biggest economic blunder, reminder again that Narendra Modi, more likely, if you ask him, who do you swear by, Indira Gandhi or Atal Bihari Vajpayee? No prizes for guessing. He will say Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So if that is the case, then remember Atal Bihari Vajpayee's words, what he called ashobhaniya, anuchit, akaran, anavashyak, that is ugly, improper, without justification, and unnecessary. He should begin the process of reversing it. It cannot be done overnight, but should be done.